I'm delighted to welcome you to the 5th webinar of our webinar series on exploring social pedagogical concepts during turbulent times. Obviously, we are very keen to promote social pedagogy, and we're very keen to make sure that the theories that people use and practice are helpful, are beneficial, support everybody's practice, particularly at the challenging moments in your career. And we're of course also keen to hear more about what is happening in practice and how is the theory being used and how might the theory need to develop further to reflect what's happening in practice. So that's why we had originally planned this webinar series. Today we'll be talking about the learning zone model in particular, and that should be very interesting in the context of the pandemic, given that the pandemic has just uprooted so many of the things that we've taken for granted that have been very much part of our comfort zone. So we'll be looking at how we can nurture learning during the pandemic. I'm very delighted to be joined by Elaine Hamilton from Nether Johnston House and Krista Parsons from Lincolnshire County Council, as well as by all of you. And unfortunately, our third contributor had to send his apologies because he's needed in the children's home he works for. So there'll be more time for discussion, more time to hear from all of you. I should also say that we are recording this webinar as we have with all the other webinars in this webinar series. So it'll be available on YouTube as soon as I get around to uploading it. That means if you don't want to be on video, you should switch off your camera when you talk. Otherwise, it will just be recording the person who is currently speaking, if that makes sense. Or just send me a little message and I'll make sure that you will not be part of the final edit. We'll just, put an image on top or something. So in terms of the webinar structure, we follow a tried and tested format, in effect, which is that I'll give a quick outline of the learning zone model in a moment, and then I'll have a fishbowl discussion with Elaine and Krista. So we'll hear from them first, and then we can have a wider exploration with everyone. So you're most welcome to share your own insights and experiences around the learning zone model. Any questions you might have, any reflections, any practice examples are more than welcome. And we'd like to round off with just kind of gathering together the key learning points for practice. So I shall start off then with a quick explanation of the learning zone model, which has 3 zones. The first one at the heart is called the comfort zone. It's something that we often talk about in everyday life, I think. And from a learning point of view, it's important that we have a comfort zone because it gives us that sense of physical and emotional safety. It offers a place for us to relax, for us to reflect, for us to rejuvenate and regain energy, so that we can hopefully then venture out of our comfort zone, so that hopefully it doesn't become a place where we feel confined and restricted and just don't want to leave. Can I just check that everybody has their microphone muted? Because I get a bit of weird feedback. Okay, perfect. So basically outside of the comfort zone is the learning zone, which is where the magic happens, which is where we go to learn, to explore, to discover new things, new insights, where we go to challenge ourselves to find out more and to gradually, by doing so, to extend our comfort zone, to grow more familiar with maybe our physical surroundings, but also maybe the things where we feel like we are confident we can cope with new situations and so forth. So it is very crucial that we venture into our learning zone, that we challenge ourselves when we feel ready to do so, to leave our comfort zone. It is equally important to know where our panic zone starts. because this is basically where learning stops and where trauma starts to happen. So this is where we get into fight, flight, freeze type responses, where all we want to do is basically go back into our comfort zone and hopefully not leave it again for a very, very long time. So it's crucial that we're aware of where people's panic zone might start and what we can do to help them kind of stay away from that as much as possible. So in effect, the aim is really to grow and our comfort and our learning zone, so that that panic zone moves further and further away the more we feel like we're able to tackle situations that might be initially challenging, but we have that support of our comfort zone, that knowledge that we can always retreat and feel safe if we need to, if we venture too far. There are two important things to mention as well. That is that this is a very dynamic model. So it depends very much on the context, on the internal and external factors. So that means it can change very quickly. It also means that we can both grow the learning and comfort zone, but also if we don't challenge ourselves to leave our comfort zone, the world becomes just ever so scary, and our comfort zone and our learning zone start to shrink. So it is really about how do we facilitate a level of growth within that to basically make sure that people feel like they're able to cope with situations. And of course, it's important also to remember that all of these zones are unique to each individual. So what might put me in my panic zone might not put anybody else into their panic zone. Far from it. It might be completely in other people's comfort zones, and vice versa. So we need to make sure that we don't think about this from our own frame of reference and then kind of dismiss people for being a bit silly or a bit, I don't know, scaredy cats, or things like that, for being in situations that wouldn't put me into my learning zone even, but would put them into the panic zone. So it is all about kind of showing that we respect that and that we give people the right to step back, the right to opt out of things. Does that make sense to people so far? Okay, I can see a few nods, and in that case, I shall just stop sharing that and we will explore that a little bit further. I've briefly spoken to Elaine earlier, and she's got some fantastic examples of how she and her team at Nether Johnson House have used the model, not just during the pandemic, but even before that, to support the way that you guys are supporting the kids in your care. So I'll hand over to you, Elaine, to tell us a little bit more about that.
Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. So I am a service manager for a residential children's home just outside of Glasgow. We currently have 4 young people that live with us, but we are a house big enough to have 7. We last year embarked on a journey of kind of revisiting our values and our vision statement for the service. And we've done that collectively with the team and our young people. In doing that, we use the theoretical underpinnings of social pedagogy and trauma-informed care to kind of look at how we wanted our values to be represented. Sorry, my assistant Oscar is giving me a hand this morning. So what we done from there was, once we established our values, we decided that in order to embed that within our everyday practice, we would have to look at some of these theories and look how they related to our practice within our supervision and within our team meetings. We hold what we call practice highlights or practice reflections. So we hold them once a month, and they're an opportunity where the team come together and they think about all of the things that have impacted their learning or their experiences working with the children over the last while, and they relate those collectively together to shared experiences, but they attribute them to theoretical approaches, and the basis for that was social ped. So one of the main ones that kept coming out was how they were learning, how they were developing their skills, and how they were embracing new techniques and new ways of working with each individual child. But in addition to that, how the children were doing the same thing. So I guess when COVID happened, we pulled together in a team meeting, which we kind of called a powwow. And we took a wee moment to think about where were we positioned at that moment in time. And whilst the world around us was in a bit of panic, and our young people were starting to verge into the panic zone a wee bit, the staff team felt that they were sitting quite comfortably within their comfort zone. And I don't know if any of you have read that there was an article written by Dr. Ian Matheson, and that he stipulates that actually residential childcare workers are used to living in a panic, living in crisis, dealing with crisis all of the time. So in actual fact, that becomes kind of second nature to them. So all of the things that we were faced with the impending lockdown, where our young people not seeing their families, they're some sort of deprivation to their liberty. They're not going to be able to be outside as much as they would like to be. They're not going to be able to see their friends, family visits and so on. We're going to be cancelled and disrupted. All of their future plans were going to be put on hold. There was going to be a bit of uncertainty. And that's stuff that in residential childcare we unfortunately deal with quite regularly. So therefore the staff team felt quite contained in that moment, and as the lockdown approached, they felt quite comfortable about dealing with those situations and how to support the young people. So we shifted our focus to, well, where are the young people? So if we're in the comfort zone, where are the young people, and how do we bring them back to that comfort zone to make sure that right now, whilst the world's gone completely bananas, that we're all feeling safe at the very, very least. That's what we can offer these young people. So we involved them in all of our decisions about what we were going to do as a service and how we were going to manage COVID, how we were going to write the kind of procedures for the house, you know, the risk assessments, all of those different parts. And we involved them in the kind of briefings from the government, Scottish Government. We created kind of popcorn sessions. So whenever Nicola Sturgeon was making a big announcement, we had popcorn and fizzy juice, and we all sat down and watched it like it was a movie, because it kind of felt a bit like it was a movie. And we reflected on what was being said and how that was likely to impact us. And we kind of strategized from there with the young people. So we kind of asked them to think about, okay, you've got this piece of information that's for now, but how is that going to feel in a week's time? How is it going to feel in 2 weeks' time? So it was really about building them up and equipping them with the knowledge that they needed to move forward in the pandemic. My assistant's not been much help this morning, more of a distraction. So as we move forward, we continue to use this model in our supervision. And we used it in our day-to-day conversations with our young people. So we started doing things like, we created a COVID-19 survival list, and we done that alongside our young people. So they created this checklist of things that they would need to survive, you know, lockdown and COVID, because it wasn't going to be as accessible to get to the shops. And to my surprise, some things that appeared on that list were false eyelashes and fake tan, because those are really, really important survival things. But in actual fact, they were so important for our young people because they helped keep them feeling safe. So there was a lot of reflection through our supervision about where we were, and it appeared quite quickly that we were in the comfort zone and we were sitting there. So how were we going to use that now? How were we going to move forward and not just sit here and watch the whole of the lockdown go past us? So a lot of our values are based on experiences, based on opportunities, you know, looking at how we can grow and develop. So we set about challenges for ourselves. And this came out of the notion that our staff are trained to deliver the Dynamic Youth Awards. And whilst being able to do that, our young people were able to achieve qualifications. So we set about asking them, okay, let's set a challenge as a house, and let's set a challenge as individuals, and let's see how we can work together to make that. So within that, there was elements of the common third, because we had a young person who the whole house challenge was around about fitness, increasing our fitness and being more involved. So some people started walking a lot more, other people started running. There were people that done cycling, but one of our young people was fixated on cycling, and he kind of said to us, you know, very early on, I've kind of chosen to have my life like this, to be kind of isolated in the house. And now when somebody says this is how it has to be, I'm thinking, nah, I want to do more. So he was pushed into his learning zone by this notion of restriction and wanting to take a bit of control back. So he got right on board and began a cycling, journey. He couldn't even ride a bike at this point. However, by the end of it, he'd cycled 17 kilometres, got from one destination to another, which was his goal. we'd shared that on social media, and other people from the residential community had saw that and really felt quite, you know, encouraged by it. So they dug out their bikes and were sending in pictures of them doing similar journeys and feeling really inspired by this young person and his determination to not let lockdown stop him. So basically, our use of the learning zone stemmed right across the staff team, but stemmed right into the whole household. So we used it in various different ways, and we continue to use it to this day. I guess our end result is that we've got all 4 of the young people who were in the house achieved several Dynamic Youth Awards qualifications throughout it. They really used the opportunity really well. They also took part in a couple of different new approaches for our service. So they designed a video to show to new young people coming to the house what it's like to live in Nether Johnson House, and shared some of their experiences. And they co-authored an article which has just been published in the Circ Journal with us about their experience of COVID, and about how what they used to help get them through it, what they learned from it, and within that there's some reflections from the young people about the experience of COVID and what it's taught them, which I think was a really, really powerful piece, really, really powerful for the staff team, because they did hit the panic zone, probably about week 5, I think. Most of the staff team hit the panic zone. And there was a lot of really, you know, emotional moments across the team. And I think part of that was actually because things were going really well, really smoothly. And we had young people who were excelling, and it kind of freaked them out a wee bit. Because when the world was going to be a bit mad round about them, they really expected our house to go a wee bit mad, and it didn't. And it was really calming for them. And that made them feel a wee bit nervous and anxious. So a lot of work was done around about containing the team at that point and bringing them back from the panic zone to reflect on what was working and what was going really, really well, and what their role in that was. And we've done that through, as I've said, the kind of supervision setup that we have, but also through these practice highlights and these practice reflections. And it was really, really positive for the team. So we're now going into lockdown 2. Pretty much with everybody sitting in the comfort zone. Our house is in tier 4 in Scotland, which is not full lockdown, but significant enough that there's nothing really open for us to be doing. With a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings about how are we going to tackle this? What did we not do great last time? And how are we going to make that work better this time? And what is our outcome? What's our aim of this lockdown? What do we hope to achieve? And I believe on the cards so far there's an igloo and a Christmas party, a virtual Christmas party, are 2 of the things that we hope to have achieved by the end of this lockdown. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Elaine. That sounds fantastic, really insightful, and I'm sure you're going to have a brilliant virtual Christmas party when it comes to it. And hopefully enough snow for the igloo, or you'll find other ways to build an igloo out of Amazon parcels or something like that. That was just really, really fascinating. And I think you really highlighted sort of the importance of taking a team approach around the learning zone model, and not just applying it to the young people and their experiences around learning, but actually looking at everybody's experience around learning, and how can we create a learning environment where everybody feels encouraged to leave their comfort zone and find something that challenges them in their own unique ways. So thanks for sharing that. Fascinating stuff. I'll hand over to Krista now to hear a little bit more about how she's been using the learning zone model in her work with Caring to Learn in Lincolnshire.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I work for Lincolnshire County Council and lead a project called Caring to Learn, which I think some of you may have heard of before. But it's focused on how to improve outcomes for looked after children predominantly, and previously looked after. We work with the virtual school. We're really lucky because we work with a really wide range of teams across the children's services and external agencies as well. And it's sort of looking at direct work as well as workforce development. So I've got a really wide-ranging approach. Now this started in 2018, January 2018, as a DFE-funded innovation project, and it's been really interesting actually. Trying to develop and deliver an innovative approach, an innovation project. And when I first kind of got into social pedagogy as part of this project and sort of discovered the learning zone, I thought this is what we're trying to do for everybody, actually. And we've gone through all of those zones as part of trying to create and embed this approach across our local authority, really. And it's highlighted actually how people, in many ways, although even when there's really good practice evident, it might be, something that's become a very sort of just repetitive for people, I think, and asking them to step out of that comfort zone has been quite tricky. But it meant one of the things we focused on was about raising the profile of our foster carers and raising their professional voice almost, and having them viewed as colleagues and fellow professionals within children's services. And that concept in many ways put some of our pushed some of our social workers and our staff out of their comfort zone, some of them verging on the panic zone, I would say, because how they pushed back against that, really, in some ways. They like in the early days of this project, it was sort of, they liked that expert professional role that they sort of did to others, particularly. And when we were trying to elevate the foster carers and some of the really experienced foster carers who had so much to give, that we were really kind of pushing them to think differently about it. I'm really pleased to say that, nearly 3 years later, we've come a really long way. We've established a fantastic team of what we call foster care education champions. We've got 24 of them now, and they really lead on peer support across the county. They're also starting to do things, well, they deliver training and learning and development workshops now for other foster carers, for schools. They advise schools on supporting looked after children. And they also now, this year, started to deliver some of the training for our social workers. And so to think how far we've come in that, moving people through that. But that was also, it was really interesting to think about how that pushing some of those foster carers who were very experienced, very successful, and amazing foster carers with a brilliant track record, but pushing them out of their comfort zone to share their knowledge and experience and to really get others to learn from that was really interesting as well. But yeah, so just 2 weeks ago, one of our foster carers who has grown a real interest through experience and through looking after some children with some really difficult sleep issues and sleep disturbance issues, has really gone into this in quite depth, done quite a bit of training. So she now delivers a regular workshop, and she's delivered that to all of our social work teams now, about understanding sleep and sleep disturbances in children, based on some of the work she's done with children in her care. So that's been really, really successful. I also wanted to talk about, in COVID, obviously, we all had to move to virtual, and that's been successful in many ways, but that has been quite a steep learning curve for a lot of people as well. But one of the things we've been trying to do is have, keep connection, build those social links between our foster carers and also our looked after children. So all our participation activities that had to go online, and that's been quite difficult when we've got lots of children and young people who were very reluctant to appear on camera, and how did we do that? But one of our foster carers in particular has got a young girl, teenager, who's 14, with her in a permanent placement. So she's been with her a long time, but she's really talented, artistic and creative, and she's been doing some amazing things in the home, and gradually kind of sharing those over time, with the foster carer coming on camera and talking about what the young person's done, showing some of those activities, sharing examples of things she's made, and with her gradually kind of speaking from the side of the camera, And she's really talked to her about using the learning zone model and using the terminology about, you know, we've got to get out of our comfort zone, and perhaps appearing on camera at this point might be too much for you. It puts you in your panic zone, but, you know, and all this. And it's really, really worked, culminated on Saturday. This young girl, Amelia, led a session for 15 other young people, just showing them how to make a really lovely snowflake out of paper. A simple activity, but it went on for about an hour and a half, and she led the session over Zoom. And she actually said to her foster carer, yeah, I'm definitely not in my panic zone about it now. So she, you know, actually using that terminology, just as you described, Elaine, you know, getting the young people to watch the briefings and really discuss those things, putting it back on the young people, isn't it? I've got a couple of photos I was just going to share because they're so lovely. Let me find the right window. Here we go. I'll share the right thing with you. So that's Amelia showing one of her expertise, snowflakes that you make with just a couple of pieces of paper and some scissors and some staples. She was on camera fully. We've used photos that are not showing her face today, but she was fully on camera from not wanting to even be in the room if a Zoom was on. She went from sitting at the side and having a voice heard to then actually taking the lead in a session. So that was really brilliant. And I think I've got a photo of. Oh no, I keep going through the same one. Here it is. And that's Jane, one of our foster care champions, who leads a session for sleep and sleep disturbance. Understanding that and techniques to support. That's her very proudly showing some of the resources she uses. But yeah, it's one of the main tools models we talk about when we do training for schools as well about behaviours communication. I'll stop sharing now, sorry. There we go. And about asking schools to use the learning zone model as a tool to, when they think about behaviours communication, what that is saying to us, what the child are trying to communicate. Can they discuss with the child about what is their comfort zone, how they can move, take steps out of that. Clearly where some of the behaviour stem from, is that pushing them too far? Are they in their anxiety zone? And schools have really embraced that actually as part of that. Some schools have used it as a reflection tool, and also to show progress as well, how children have moved from so much and so many things in their anxiety zone. They've plotted it as part on using the model as a diagram, and then coming back to that later to say, oh, look how things have moved now from your learning zone to your comfort zone, and also how things have moved out of your anxiety zone into your learning zone as well. And so they're using that as an actual tool to document children's progress, which I think is a really useful way of doing it as well.
Absolutely, that's great to hear that schools are using that as well. And yeah, I have to say, lovely snowflakes. These are amazing. We need to share the instructions for how to do those. I think I think there's loads in there that's really fascinating. I think what the example with the girl showed is very much that it is about trying to take a very gradual approach and showing that we're going to do this at the right pace for you. We're going to make sure that you're not going to be close to your panic zone. And if you feel like we're going too fast, too soon, we can go one step back. And that's, I think, an important message to send to people, particularly people that are really worried about leaving their comfort zone and entering their panic zone, because it's most definitely not a nice place to be in, the panic zone. So being really respectful and showing that we understand that you always have the right, we're there to support you, is really important. And it's great to hear if schools are taking a similar approach and kind of recognizing that we need to learn at the right pace for each individual, not just at sort of an average pace that suits some kids more and leaves others behind. So that's really heartening to hear. Fantastic. So Ian's just posted, the journey is just as powerful as the destination. Absolutely. Ian, can I invite you to say a little bit more about that? Share your reflections with us, please.
Yeah, some fascinating things there. I mean, that resonates for myself. I'll probably resonate with Mick actually as well. I've been understanding of youth work, and I think what I found from my previous practice is that the journey is probably the crucial element, whereas the destination is amazing and it's fantastic, and you know the end product or the end whatever it is for that individual is actually amazing. But actually, the journey is probably the most problematic part. But actually, I think that's the stage where so much more is learned and developed. And I think, you know, just like Christopher was saying, you know, first the young person wanted to speak but didn't want to, you know, go on camera. Then the next element, I think it's sometimes trying to explore that with other professionals that actually don't always look for the end outcome. Try and look at the journey, and that's just as powerful. And I mean, yeah, I've got many examples of that with young people, but also colleagues but also myself. And I think we sometimes forget the journey is just as powerful. And it's, I suppose, problematic in in suppose the environment we're in. But and I think that's why social pedagogy lends itself to the importance. And again, the learning zone model for me is a very reflective, self-aware, but also aware of others, value-based tool that I think you can use in different contexts. And you know, it's probably something I was using and didn't realise I was using it. So now I've got a term for it and a label for it. Even though I don't like using labels, but it identifies with many things that I've done in the past. So yeah, it's a mantra I tend to use quite a lot now about the journey. And I think, you know, colleagues and students I work with tend to get sick of me hearing it, but you know, I think it's just important.
Yeah,
I'll stop there.
Thanks. I think you're making a really crucial point, because in many respects the outcome is more powerful the more attention we pay to the journey, and the more we kind of really get the journey right by focusing on it and being alongside, being supportive, and doing things at the right pace for that person. You know, I think Krista, the foster girl, she would never have been able to do that if all we had focused on was the outcome of you have to run a session on Zoom. So only by taking that focus away and actually reflecting with her and thinking this through with her, I think that's where the model is really powerful, because as you say, Ian, it's simple enough that we can visualize that quite easily. You know, you can physically visualize it in a room, or with objects, or with Lego figures, or whatever. So it lends itself very easily to then kind of have a discussion and yeah, find out so many fascinating things. I remember one example from a Scottish children's home where two of their workers had an issue with engaging a young girl to go to school, and she'd always been labeled as school refuser, and everybody was like, oh, you need to just kind of force her, you know, she has to go to school, and all of that you then get. And what they did was they sat down with her, they kind of looked at every single part of her school journey from a learning zone model kind of understanding, and tried to get her to pin down when was she where in terms of comfort zone, learning zone, panic zone. And that helped them identify that actually the moments when she was in the panic zone was just a few times during her school day, and was usually the break times when she just felt more isolated from all the other kids, because she'd only just started going to school there. And you know, there are many reasons why particularly kids in care would feel socially isolated potentially, and so that was the moments that just made her not want to go to school. And when they understood that and kind of were able to talk that through with her, were able to kind of share that then with the teacher, and together with the girl kind of look for ways in which they could help her not be in her panic zone during the break times. Actually, she was very keen to engage with school and very keen to go. And everybody had a shared understanding of what was causing so many challenges for her. And it wasn't the entire school day. And it wasn't that she hated school at all. It was just those moments that were really crucial. So I think you're right. It's a good model to facilitate a conversation about what we can do to support you to be in your learning zone, but be close enough to your comfort zone. Mick, I've just seen you raise your hand. I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. Just a quick one, really, an observation more than anything. I'm sort of in my panic zone now because of these Zoom things. I need to go on one of your sessions, Krista. I think it's you know, it's about Elaine and Krista. Thank you for those examples. Some really interesting points there. We obviously need to add false eyelashes to Maslow's hierarchy of needs now, and, and as well as Wi-Fi. You know, I think we need a new modern COVID-19 version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, really, which should be an interesting visual triangle. Gabriel, there's a task for you. Maslow reinvented. Now, just the two examples there and what you were saying, Gabriel, it just reminded me really of Paulo Freire's real sort of key element of young people learning is relevance. And I think more than ever, we need relevance in young people's learnings. And those two examples that we just heard, you know, related to the young people's real lives and related to learning in the real world. And if we make learning relevant to young people, which was Freire's point, then they will engage better. And whether it be learning how to cycle in Elaine's example, or making a snowflake and developing artistic talent in Krista's example, it's about that relevance and engagement with something that there is real life situation for those young people. So I just wanted to add that sort of Freire reference in, that learning has to include relevance to young people's lives.
Yeah, that's a really helpful point. And I think at a time when it's all too easy to just sit on the sofa and watch Netflix during lockdown all day long, every day, it's brilliant to hear that you guys are able to kind of find something that gives young people relevance, gives them a motivation to want to do other things as well. Grant, have we got any other thoughts, any other examples that folk might want to share?
I've got one example that, good morning, that relates to the relevance. I just had the opportunity to be back in Germany with my parents for a couple of weeks. And partly one of the things we did, we read my previous school records. And one notion was very clear. Every time I wasn't interested or engaged in the subject, I turned into this young man that was disturbing the class, not listening, finding it more interesting to talk to the neighbor than to be attentive to the lesson. And it could be the same year, it's a different subject. And the report showed I was very interesting. I was producing relevant material and so far. So it was real example of when it's relevant, when it's engaging, then young people will also listen. The other very funny example was when a group of teachers pulled my parents aside and they said, your son isn't doing enough for school. You need to stop him going to the orchestras that he's playing cello in. You need to stop him going to the circus next to school. He's doing too much next to school. And my parents very confidently said, that's what he lives on. That's where he gets more from than in school. And they told these teachers to go their ways and continued sending me to orchestras and circus classes. And now I'm running a little circus for young people with special needs. So relevance is definitely very important.
That's good to hear, yeah, absolutely. And it's good to hear that your parents supported that as well. Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that, Martin. Would anyone else like to share any thoughts or examples you have?
Can I just say, I think that's really, really important. I think the relevance is huge, but I think it's more about the whole picture, isn't it? So it's about the wider circle. And the learning doesn't occur just in one pocket or one silo, or about the notion of, oh, let's go cycling and let's set a goal or a challenge, but it happens in amongst all of that experience of how you're being encouraged to do that and how you're being supported to do that. So this young person was supported not only by the staff, but some of his his peers, sorry, in the house were saying, you can totally do this. Why don't we do it together? You know, like, I'll cycle it with you. And they were doing the kind of training sessions with him, and the other young people could have probably cycled the 17 kilometres on the first go. But they done the step by step approach with them, just to include them, be included with them, and be doing this thing together. And I think that's really important, that the learning for him at the end of it all was that some people that you wouldn't think that you can count on when things are really tough, you can. Mm-hmm. And about how you find that in times where things are difficult, and about how it changes people's thought process about each other and about how they see one another. And I guess that for me, the relevance is important, but sometimes the collective, and you know, the cycling didn't have a relevance to the other young people. They weren't bothered about cycling, but they wanted to do it for him, and do it to support him. So there's something in that. Sorry, here comes my assistant again. The little streak past, I think it's in a catwalk, I think. Pardon the pun. So yeah, I think that the sharing of the experience was our learning, and the fact that we were able to share this experience together collectively. And so some of those things weren't necessarily relevant to individuals, but as a collective community and as a house, they became relevant, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and they had meaning because the relationships that you guys have built with each other are meaningful. So it might not be my aim to cycle 17 kilometers, but if it's your aim, then it's important to me to see what I can do to support you in that. So that's fascinating to hear. That's really, yeah, really encouraging. Great piece of work. Brilliant. Have we got any other examples or any other reflections that people want to share?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, just kind of, some people have probably, I know some people have definitely heard me talk about this before, so sorry for repeating it, but I just think the connection with liminal spaces and thinking about liminal spaces as this time of suspended in ambiguity, and it kind of reminds me a little bit in terms of Elaine's example there, thinking about that as we, you know, COVID has really presented this space that we've never seen and felt before. And so people are working in different ways and are responding in different ways. And it's such an opportunity for that space for learning has grown at such a speed for us, but actually really presents some opportunities to see things differently. And I think that's been really quite exciting. There's been lots of articles that have been written and lots of examples around how people have responded in ways that we perhaps wouldn't have expected, and like I said, make those relationships, made connections, been more inclusive. So it's how we can capture some of that learning as well, and just have a new lens to see things through that I think we wouldn't have had it not been for COVID.
Yeah, certainly. Great.
Yeah, it's almost provided, well, it's definitely provided the impetus, hasn't it? I think just a simple thing like in my local authority, you know, we all were asked to work at home immediately after the start of the first lockdown. And then about 4 weeks later, we all had Teams was suddenly installed on our laptops, and everybody's been asked to use this. And the massive, and some of us, you know, perhaps who are a bit more forward thinking, I don't know, or innovative, I like to think occasionally, you know, been asking for, oh, wouldn't it be so much easier if we had, you know, better video conferencing facilities? You know, been asking that for 3 years. And then other people have been like, oh, I've not switched that thing on for, even though it's been on my desktop, you know, for a month. And I suppose that you have to have a driving force, you have to have relevance, and it's really forced some people out of their comfort zone to use it. But because there's a real need there, isn't it? So you have to have that driving force behind it sometimes, rather than just thinking, oh yes, that's something I should do, or I would like to do, or I want to try. What's the driving force behind it sometimes that can just give you that push from, you know, your comfort zone into trying something new and doing something different as well.
Yeah, just because you have to. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the pandemic has had many of those moments for people where we've just found ourselves far out of our comfort zone pretty much overnight, and having to kind of deal with that. I think, Krista, your example earlier also alluded to another interesting aspect, which is around power. And I think what happens when you give people the kind of space and the power to step out of their comfort zone and do something meaningful, like the foster carers, you know, actually having the power to run a training session for others where they were able to share their experience. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we had everything in the early days. From one of the things we do as part of our project is everything is joint. So if we run a workshop or a training development session, we don't do separate ones for foster carers, schools, and for social care teams. We do them all joint together. And that was about, again, building connections between different people, trying to break out of silo or team working, to view ourselves as one whole team around the child, ways to encourage that. And even, not from everyone, but from, you know, some areas, that the biggest resistance we had to that for training together was from children's social workers. And that was really interesting to me, to you know, that there was that hierarchy was quite well embedded there, even subconsciously, you know, that they had to feel like the experts. And they said things like, but if the foster carers do all this new training, they'll know more than us, you know, and or oh, I'll, you know, how I'll have to, they'll be telling me things and things like that. And we said, yeah, where's the harm in that? You know, they sound silly, don't they, when you vocalize them like that out of context, but actually there were real concerns for people that they were, you know, our SSWs, they're called supervising social workers. One lady was saying, how can I supervise someone if they know more than me? And I said, well, I've been doing that most of my life, you know, I was a head teacher in school, fairly young in some ways, a few years ago, you know, leading people who've been teaching 30 years. And you think, yeah, you do that most of your life in many situations, don't you? But some people find that quite a difficult concept. And also that's kind of shared idea. And what we talk so much, don't we, about child's voice and adult's voice and those kinds of things, but actually what does it mean past a tick box or filling in a section on a form? It's about actually, you know, listening to what are the priorities and not just transferring what we think our priorities are over to a group of people. Here, this is what you need to know. Actually listening to them and saying, what do you need to know? What do you want to find out more about, or what do you want to develop in? So yeah, that was quite an interesting one. But then also, you know, from moving from just simple kind of anxieties like that to sort of what are real anxieties, I suppose, when we're giving more agency to our foster care champions, and they're taking on a lot of support lead roles across what we call our community hub. We've had real concern and pushback from, for instance, our placement support workers who are saying, well, they're doing our job now. Is our job still relevant? And that's pushed us into thinking, actually, you know, what are those roles about, and what do we do, and how do we use them really effectively? And we've done that in lots of ways. So, you know, and those are real concerns for people, obviously, when and so we've had to go back and think about what that means, and what we are asking people to do, and how they can work together really effectively to do that, and then how we can utilize people in different roles and change their roles as well to be even more effective. And I think, you know, for instance, our placement support workers, you know, a lot of things they did were just tea and sympathy on the phone, meeting people, going along, supporting them. And our foster carers champions do that amazingly, you know. So now we've had the opportunity, we've been able to train our placement support workers to deliver therapy, and they have more time to do that at a really good level. Now they're not doing some of the other stuff that took up a lot of their time, and so yeah, that's been a really, and they also then now feel professionally empowered because they're doing something you know, really at a quite high level, and so they kind of move through those zones with understanding that as well.
Thanks. That's really interesting, because it sounds very much like the empowerment happens when people are in their learning zone, doesn't it? Whether that's the foster carers feeling able to share their experience, you know, their expertise that they hold about things like how to settle kids for bedtime and how to support them at nighttime, and so many more things. And to be able to find something that enables the social workers to kind of feel similar, to learn something new like TheraPlay, and the empowering effect that has, it's just really fascinating. It makes me think quite a lot about sort of the relationship between power and learning, and what we can do to make sure that somebody's sense of empowerment doesn't come at the cost of somebody else's sense of loss of power. Because I think the key thing is that power isn't something that you can just kind of take away from somebody and give to someone else. It's something that we can actually multiply when we look at it from that perspective that you have done.
Yeah, we had to go through a bit of pain before we discovered this ourselves, you know, and I think that we realized actually, you know, how we were doing that. And then we saw a really good infographic I saw earlier this year about how you like sharing power is lighting a candle. You light someone else's candle, you don't blow your own candle out, you know, and you can pass that on and light each other's candles. And I thought that was a really good visual of what we were trying to achieve. But perhaps at first we were lighting a candle and blowing the other one out straight away, and so we had to learn from that. I think the best way to do it. You're quite right.
That's a beautiful metaphor, because I think it also shows that sometimes it's just the worry that you're going to blow out my candle when you light somebody else's candle, because there's now enough light and you don't need me anymore. So it's, you know, and that might be that irrational fear, but it's still kind of that bit that can put people into their panic zone. So being respectful and helping those people to kind of see like, yeah, actually we'll find ways in which that your illumination adds or the other person's adds, rather than replaces, is really interesting. Fantastic. So we're nearing the end of this week's webinar. What I would like you to do is to just post any key learning points for you from today around the learning zone model, because we're trying to add a bit more to the visual about social pedagogy, which is kind of, when I switch off my camera, you can see the visual replacing my video feed. So we're trying to add a couple more layers to this as we go along, and it would be important to make sure that that's reflective of what you guys think are the key learning points, what lends relevance and importance and significance to each model as we go through them. So if you would like to just post a couple of things there, that would be grand. But equally, feel free to share any more points. I think just to pick out one, Ian, I'll come back to you, of course, because you were talking about problem posing as another Freirean concept, and that can be used proactively rather than reactively. I'm intrigued. Can you tell us more?
Actually, as a response to Robin's comments regarding problem posing, it was ironically I actually just used that last week in one of my lectures with some of the students. I think it's almost that rather than trying to look for the or trying to react to something, it's almost trying to look ahead or look down the pathway of, if it's with a young person, for example, you know, can we explore the things that may arise, and rather than trying to react to them, use it proactively. And it doesn't always, you can't always solve everything there and then, but I think it develops skill set, it develops confidence and self-esteem, and actually you as the supporting role, but also the other person actually developing their own strategies to manage situations. So I think actually problem posing sometimes can be perceived as something negative, but actually it can be something useful and positive, and you can almost look out for these things on the horizon. And I think if you link that with experiential learning, then hopefully if, for example, a young person's gone through an experience, they've got a few things in the toolkit to go, okay, I managed that last time, maybe I can manage it again. That's how I saw kind of problem posing. as a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I'm also just reminded that it's important we highlight that this isn't just a model that works with kids, and I hope that some of the examples have shown that it works with adults as well. And I think as we grow older, it becomes just as important and just as relevant that we continue to focus on learning, even well into older age, particularly when people go through transitions in their lives and are almost forced to leave their comfort zone, maybe because they can't live in their own house anymore and have to move into an older person's home, or situations like that, or through bereavement that can drive someone way out of their comfort zone overnight into their panic zone. So it continues to be of relevance, of course, because we're all, as human beings, we're all learners throughout our entire lives. So I just wanted to highlight that point. I can see Ali grin. So I
shall just in case any of you there thought that Gabriel said asshole human beings, he was saying as whole human beings. But I like to pick him up on it whenever he says it.
Yeah, and whenever Ali has that grin on her face, I know exactly what I may or may not have said. So that's brilliant. Great. Would anybody else like to have the chance to just mention anything else that has come to mind? Anything that you want to share before we draw the webinar to a close? Robin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the lockdown has meant for a lot of sort of senior managers in local authorities, they've become terribly comfortable because all of a sudden their life has become a lot more manageable. What that has meant for certainly some social workers that I'm supporting at the moment is that they don't get the critical reflection space that they might have had before. And actually reflection, as Lane's example showed really well, is such an important part for the learning zone so that we can grow our comfort zone. So one, come to next month's webinar, but two, have a thought about social workers and what support they're getting at the moment, because I think a lot of them are getting very little in the way of support. And there's this kind of positivism, often in the sort of higher power ranks of the management, that doesn't seem to really be able to see that at the moment. So yeah, just wanted to mention.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a really important point. And I think as always, it is about us being empathetic with people and trying to understand what are their life worlds like and what might that mean for where they're at in terms of comfort, learning, or panic zone. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much, Robin. You've also neatly kind of made a little reference to the next webinar, which is going to be on critical reflection and the feeler model as one example. And Robin and I will be hosting that. And we'll have a few more people joining us to share some of their experiences, including Simon Yor and Chardell, whose surname I have just forgotten. But there are not that many Chardells in the social pedagogy world.
Mathiasen.
That's the one. Perfect. So I hope you'll be able to join us again, and we'll in due course we'll also announce sort of the program for the first couple of months in 2021. Hope you've all enjoyed yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you again. There's also the SPDN event on Friday, so if you haven't already signed up and want a bit more of a social pedagogy boost, come along on Friday 10 o'clock till 1 o'clock, and you'll be able to talk more about social pedagogy and anything else that you want to talk about with the people you like to talk about and spend time with. So yeah, thanks very much. I hope to see you all. Have a good day